everybody. My name is Rebekah Scroggy. I am a registered nurse and an IBCLC, but probably most importantly, I am a mom to 2 kids. I am so beyond thrilled to be here with you and share some amazing superstar interviews with you all. We will be going over amazing topics like lactation, postpartum mental health, pelvic floor, and so much more. Just to make sure you don't miss anything, make sure to hit subscribe and follow us on all of our socials. We'll link them below. And as always, we want to know what you want to hear. So comment below any topics that you'd like us to cover. So now that we got that over with, here we go.
Anyway, let's talk about bottles.
Let's talk about bottles.
So my name is Julie Matheny. I have LA Lactation as my private practice in Los Angeles. I work with families both here in LA and across the world, really. I started my career as a speech language pathologist in an intensive feeding setting. So I don't work in the schools. I've never worked in a school. I don't do R's and L's and S's. I've only ever worked with feeding and swallowing disorders. So I worked in the neonatal unit in the hospital. I worked with adults who were had strokes or car accidents or COVID or whatever. And my job was to rehabilitate the swallow so that they could safely eat. And after doing that for a very long number of years, I transitioned into lactation. Feeding babies was always my passion. That was always the goal. So in the hospital, I worked part-time in speech therapy and part-time in lactation. And then in 2021, quit the hospital and am now in full-time private practice. So I approach babies from a feeding and swallowing perspective. And now work with the dyad, so the mother or parent and the baby, helping families feed their babies. Our anatomy, the actual structures, help determine the physiology, what those structures can do. And those can cause symptoms if they don't work how the body was designed to work. So the muscles of our face, the muscles of our tongue, the bones, the structures all determine how they work. And if they're not working optimally, they can cause symptoms. So we really want to have the anatomy working optimally so that we're not having symptoms. So symptoms could be coughing and choking. It could be leaking milk for a baby, right, for baby feeding. It could be fussiness, difficulties latching, breast or bottle. And a lot of times those symptoms point us back to physiology, which points us back to anatomy. So kind of in a nutshell, how a baby's born, their anatomy will impact how they feed. So as a speech pathologist, I'm looking at how does your anatomy impact your feeding? Because if you're continually using those patterns, that then changes the development of your face and of your airway and of your body, which then have lifelong impacts.
Yeah. Wow, that's so, I love how you talked about that, because I hear so many pediatricians that are like, if your baby can't breastfeed, it's okay, just give them formula. And, you're explaining that it impacts it all. Like, it's not just breastfeeding that oral development can impact. It's all of it.
It's all connected, right? Like the biological norm of our species is to breastfeed. So before bottles are a modern invention, right? We bought baby bottles as we know them today are made out of plastic or glass and silicone. They used to be out of glass and rubber. But that rubber and glass manufacturing is a fairly modern concept, right? So pre-bottles, like 150 years, pre-bottles, if your baby couldn't breastfeed from you or a wet nurse, somebody else who had a milk supply and nursed your baby, or if you couldn't get them to feed, they didn't survive. We had a very high infant mortality rate through history. So yes, thank God for modern medicine. Thank God for living in 2025 with all of the options and research and information that we have. But if a baby can't breastfeed, which is how babies are supposed to feed to survive, if they can't, we as clinicians want to know why, right? So that we can help optimize feeding. Now, there's nothing wrong with bottle feeding. There's nothing wrong with formula feeding. But in my clinical mind, I always want to know why, so that we can hopefully address issues now instead of having them be more challenging or like issues.
Yeah. Prevent things that could happen, you know, way later for sure. That's amazing.
So there's functional and there's
Mhm.
optimal. Functional means I can do it. Optimal means this gives us the best possibility for setting up for success, right? So I've been sipping on my coffee now. I don't know about you, but I have a preferred support water bottle, right? I have a preferred coffee mug. It's the
I do
way the
too.
handle feels. It's the way the rim of the cup is. It's right. This is my optimal coffee feeding system. Can I go to a restaurant and use a really thick mug or a really narrow mug? Yes, because I'm functional, right? But it
Yeah.
changes how I swallow. Have you ever had a mug that's not your mug and you go to drink and you leak all over yourself and you cough and choke and you're like, I've been swallowing for a number of years. Why am I having an issue? Because you're functional, but this is
Mhm.
your optimal. And it's a similar concept with babies. Babies can function. Many babies with functioning mouths with normal anatomy can function on any system. They can drink their water through a coffee stir, right?
Yeah.
But at the sake or at using compensations, right? Like really narrow lips and really
Yeah.
tight cheeks and lots of tension. So you can functionally do that. But optimally, we want to promote a latch that looks like a breastfeeding latch, right? Because that's the optimal
Yeah.
biological norm of the species. So bottle nipples come in a variety of shapes and lengths and thicknesses and materials. So yes, some babies can function off of really narrow straw-like latch bottles where us as professionals are like, oh my gosh, it's horrible. They're not latching well. I'm like, why? Because they can function. But we
Yeah.
really want to be using nipples that are optimal. So we want to
Mhm.
find that perfect match that really uses anatomy to our advantage so that we're not causing symptoms, so that we're not causing dimpled cheeks or red
Mhm.
creases or lip blisters or
Yeah.
leaking or choking. So that's really why we want to find an optimal bottle for each baby.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
All right, so let's talk shape, right?
Mhm.
This bottle nipple has what we call a straw-like shape. It's a
Mhm.
straw nipple with a shoulder to it. So when a baby's mouth latches, they're going to make an air pocket on that shape. So
Mm.
any shape that's like a nipply nipple that's just kind of a nubbin that's on a
Mhm.
shoulder is going to promote a more shallow latch. Okay.
Okay.
When you have a bottle that has a more tapered shape and that
Mm.
baby latches on, they're not going to create an air pocket, so they'll swallow
Mhm.
less air and they'll have a better, deeper latch to that system. Okay. You could also have a taper that looks like this. So
Mm.
this has a little nipply nipple, but it's tapered. So again, when they latch, they're not
Mhm.
creating any air pocket. So they'll swallow less air and get a deeper latch to a system like this. So it's got a nice wide latch, but it's tapered. Then you have shapes like this that are all
Mhm.
pinched and wonky, right? So this is kind of a straw-like latch, but it's got a flattening. And then it has this like weird shoulder. Again, a bottle like this is going to create an air pocket when the baby latches, and can make it more difficult for them to get a deep latch. Now, there is no all or nothing. We can never say all babies do this, no baby does that, right? There's all, most, many, some,
Yeah.
few, none.
Yeah.
There are some babies that do need to have the bottle compensate because their
Mhm.
anatomy is not normal,
Yeah.
right? So while some babies can function on this, it's not optimal, but some babies might need something suboptimal to compensate.
Mhm.
Okay. So when
Yeah.
parents are looking for bottles, they should look for a tapered nipple that
Mhm.
slopes, in a soft material that promotes a deep latch and not be going off of the marketing that it looks like a boob or works like a boob.
Mhm. Yeah, for sure. What about like one of the ones for like a smaller bottle? Like if you had the narrow bottles instead of the wider ones?
Another one of those. This is kind of your
Mhm.
classic baby bottle nipple, much narrower. There's a couple brands that have nipples similar to this. And again, when you do that triangle test, they're still going to latch deeply to this because it makes that taper. So you're still going to be able to get a wide latch. The lips are going to flange really far to the base of this, and there's not much of a gap between the taper and the tip, right? So you're still going to get
Gotcha.
an optimal latch to this type of bottle as well.
Yeah. Yeah. So that one, the baby's mouth would have to be almost to like the very edge of
Ring.
the
You want them all the way to
bottle.
the ring. Yep.
I love this because I'm learning stuff too. It's so fun.
Just also so you know, for professionals, I do teach a 7-hour bottle selection course through the Lactation OT. So if there are lactation professionals, speech, occupational, physical therapists out there watching this, and they're interested to know more, this is just like a real quick and dirty touch on these topics, right? So if anyone is interested in taking that advanced course for healthcare professionals, it is at thelactationot.com. So that you can, all of this is, again, I teach on it professionally, so you can kind of see even more.
I know you do. That's why I asked you to do this.
It's kind of like if you go to a drinking fountain and you have a really slow flow and you're like sucking off of the faucet, and then you have a really fast flow and you're like, oh my gosh, I can't keep up, right? We're really trying to find the correct flow for each individual baby. Every breast or chest, however you prefer to term it, will flow at its own rate, its own speed. So what we're really trying to do is to make sure that the flow, if there's breastfeeding as the goal, breast or chest feeding as the goal and desire, that we're then matching the flow of that bottle to the flow of the breast, so that we're not overwhelming the baby, right? If the baby is not breastfeeding, we're just bottle feeding, we want to make sure that we are approaching bottle feeding as if we were breastfeeding. Okay. So we want to make sure that the baby's not coughing or choking because it's too fast, that they're not trying to catch up on their breath, that they're not holding their breath, that they're not leaking milk because it's too fast. And it takes the human stomach about 20 minutes to tell the brain that it's full, right? So if I go to an all-you-can-eat pizza buffet, I will eat a whole pizza in 5 minutes and then be like, oh, I ate too much. I ate too much too fast, right? But if I sit down at a French dining restaurant where they bring me little plates, I have an appetizer and then I have a salad and then I have the meal, I tend to eat less because I've given my stomach time to register it's full. So we're really trying to find the flow rate for each baby that slows the baby down so that it gives their stomach time to tell the brain they're full without overfeeding. Because you have a human baby with a human stomach. We can all eat too much too fast, which can lead to digestive discomfort, gassiness, fussiness. It can lead to reflux. It can lead to poop issues, right? So we're really trying to think like a therapist. We're trying to match the flow of the bottle so that we're not causing symptoms here, and then match the flow of the bottle so we're not causing symptoms here. So we're trying to slow it down, and every baby is a little different in how they want to feed. Some can go a little faster, some need to go a little slower, but we're trying to find what flow rate works best for that baby so that we're not causing symptoms.
So is that something that you would recommend parents to buy, like to start off with the slowest flow and then go up? Because I know a lot of the nipples have like, this is for 3 months, this is for 6 months. Like that doesn't matter, right?
It's all marketing. They want you to buy a new nipple like you buy a new Carter's onesie. This is a multi-billion-dollar with a B, multi-billion-dollar industry where they want you to buy more product. They want you to buy more bottles. They want you to buy new nipples. They want you to buy more formula, or feel like you don't have enough with breast milk. And it is unfortunately one of the subtle things in the industry of marketing. You want to find the flow that works for the baby and stay with that until you see symptoms, right? So if you have a baby that's taking 30 to 45 minutes to feed on a slow flow nipple, they might need the next flow up. They might need a different shape. They might need a different bottle. But typically the breast has a flow. The flow at the breast can go up and down slightly depending on how full the breast is, where we're at in our lactation. But at 6 months, the flow rate doesn't change at the breast. Once it's established, it's there. So it is a little bit different where we're trying to match the flow of the breast to the flow of the bottle so that we're not having a flow confusion. and we're trying not to cause symptoms. So we're symptom chasers. If the bottle's flowing too slow, we might need a faster flow or a different nipple. If the baby's coughing, choking, leaking, might need a different bottle, might need a different flow.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I like how you share the different symptoms, because I feel like nobody knows. I get asked that all the time. When do I go up on the nipples like flow or things like that? I get asked that all the time. So I totally appreciate you talking about that.
It's a tricky conversation because we want to feed the baby, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's really all about frequency and duration of sucking that will eventually change how the face works. So, yes, breastfeeding uses the tongue and the jaw. It promotes good facial development, but there's other factors that also promote facial development, right? The anatomy. If you have a tongue tie and a lip tie, it doesn't matter what you feed from, your anatomy is being changed because of your own anatomy. So we're trying to use, again, in my opinion, we're trying to go more of the shape of the bottle than necessarily the material. If you want all honesty, the best way to promote facial development is to skip a bottle altogether and cup feed. But baby bottles are the symbol of babyhood, right? Every baby shower, every gift bag, every registry, invitation has a bottle as a symbol of infancy. So it's hard to shift the cultural mindset that you need a bottle, when in reality, cup feeding actually does promote the same muscle use as breastfeeding.
Oh, wow. I would love to like have that be more of a norm, because like I don't know any daycare that would accept a baby without also a bottle to come with the baby.
We have some here in LA, but it's Los Angeles. It's Los Angeles. We're a unicorn, right? So there are some daycares that will take babies on straw cups or cup feeding. Breastfeeding is very well supported, in my opinion, here in Los Angeles on the West Coast, because we have such a huge population where it's really promoted. Other areas of the country, you're absolutely right. It's like, you want me to do what to that baby? Like, crazy.
I feel like sometimes we're just fighting still to get like the amounts down, and I couldn't imagine trying to also be like, also, you don't need to feed my baby a bottle, and they'd be like, what?
Excuse me? Pick a tapered nipple that optimizes a good latch, right? Pick a flow rate that matches the flow at the breast, and don't let caregivers overfeed your human baby, because usually it's not they're not confused by your nipple or a bottle nipple. They get used to differences in flows and how they're being fed. Babies are also survivalists. If a baby is struggling to breastfeed but is surviving on a bottle, they will shut down because they want to survive. So you're really trying to match the bottle to the breast when breast is optimal. And if breast is not optimal, we're figuring out why, so that we can protect it. And then again, I love going to Taco Tuesday and eating that whole basket of chips, because I have a human stomach, right? Human babies get real used to getting really big volumes and feeling satiated for longer from a bottle. So it's educating caregivers to not overfeed the baby, and that not every cry is a hunger cue. So yes, it is part of the reason why we have the statistics and research that we do. It is part of the reason. It's a bigger conversation, it is a bigger picture, but it is one of the reasons why we tend to see the differences in exclusively formula bottle fed babies versus breastfed babies. Because if a baby is comforting at the breast, they're not always eating. They can be sucking without actually moving milk. They can change how they suck and feed, and the breast needs stimulated to flow. But if you do put a bottle in and there's any kind of flow, that baby's obligated to swallow, otherwise they'll choke. So that there are subtle differences in breast and bottle feeding, and from a comfort perspective, it does absolutely work different. This is my opinion based on my experience and exposure, right? I am a NICU, NICU, neonatal intensive care trained, hospital trained speech language pathologist, where my job was to bottle feed babies, right? So my whole role was helping to feed babies so that they could be discharged home. My lens, my clinical lens is always as a speech therapist. I can't take that away, right? I am of
Yeah.
the opinion that you can start bottles as early as needed and it won't sabotage breastfeeding if you know how it works, right?
Yeah.
So I also understand as an IBCLC, the World Health Organization Code of Ethics and baby friendly hospitals. I know all of the things, right? So baby friendly in the United States says that you should wait on bottles until breastfeeding is established. You should do no pacifiers. We should be promoting breastfeeding. Sometimes in a realistic modern world, that's not physically possible, right? So I'm of the opinion that you can give a bottle at any point in time in the journey if you know how it works and you're promoting deep latch and not sabotaging flow. Okay.
Yeah.
A lot of lactation consultants will wait at least 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks. What I know as a speech therapist is that babies are relying on reflex and instinct for the first 6 to 8 weeks to be able, they'll latch to anything and suck on anything, and
Yep.
they're obligated to swallow if there's flow there. So we can optimize teaching a baby to go back and forth between breast and bottle in the first couple weeks. After those reflexes for sucking have integrated, they want to chew. So the first couple weeks is help me learn to suck and swallow so that I can feed from the breast. And now that I know how to do that on my own, now I want to focus on chewing so that at 6 months, all my reflexes have helped me practice before I ever put a solid food in my mouth. So I do think it's very detrimental to tell families, especially at that 3 to 4 month mark when a lot of people are going back to work, to not introduce a bottle until then, because that baby is no longer riding on suck reflexes. They want to chew.
Yeah.
So a lot of babies are like, I don't know what that is. You've never shown me
Yeah.
that before. I have to do what with my mouth on that? That feels
Yeah.
so different than my mom.
Yeah.
So I'm of the opinion that if you have to go back to work between 3 to 6 months, to introduce a bottle early, somewhere between birth and 6 weeks, and keep it in some kind of consistency so the baby knows how to use their motor planning, their muscles to
Yeah.
feed on that. But if a family doesn't want to do that and the baby refuses a bottle, you can do a cup at any point in
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
So it depends on, are they going to daycare? Who's in the daycare? Do they feel comfortable with that? Is it a nanny or a family member that's watching the
Yeah.
baby? So it really comes down to what's the individual lifestyle and work system of that family unit to decide whether we start a bottle early or don't, and how we incorporate that into feeding.
That's amazing. And Julie, I wish you had been with me when I had my second, because she totally went through bottle refusal, and that was such a stressful thing for me because I did what everyone told me. I didn't introduce bottles early because I was like, ah, she'll be fine. And then she was not fine, and that was incredibly stressful.
Yeah, my first took a bottle fine. I went back to work at 3 months. She took
hmm
a bottle. It was never an issue. My second, I went back to work at 5.5 months and she refused the bottle. And
Yeah.
I got horrific messages. My husband was home with her and I got horrific messages of, this child won't eat and I'm stressed and she's stressed and we're both in
hmm
tears.
Yeah.
And so I put my own second kid on a cup and a straw cup. And it was one of those, my husband was like, this is what you do, fix it. And I'm like, okay.
You're
Which
like,
led
okay, that's a lot of pressure.
which led me to then do the lactation OT bottle refusal course, because I am of the professional opinion not to separate moms and babies when we have a bottle refuser. I actually
Yeah.
recommend mom giving the bottle in a bait and switch at the breast. So
Yeah.
latching because that's all baby knows, and baiting and switching, going back and forth
hmm
doing. Now I also, depending on the age of the baby, depending on the what's going on with the behaviors of the baby, we do different techniques. We might do oral motor exercises, we might do body exercises, we might use the bottle nipple as a suck training tool depending on their age. But I am not necessarily pro remove mom from the feeding
Yeah.
equation for a refuser. We're using her and the baby's
Mhm.
understanding of feeding is at the breast to our advantage with a bottle refuser.
Yeah, I've also found that sometimes having mom leave the premises makes it more stressful
Yes.
situation for mom and baby. And as we all know, I don't know about you, but when I'm stressed, it is very hard to learn a new skill.
Yeah.
So that really makes a lot of sense to me.
Well,
It's
on the
crazy.
bottle refusal, it really depends on the age. If you have a baby who
Yeah.
still should be relying on reflex and instinct for
Mhm.
sucking, that's an anatomy oral issue with the baby.
Yeah.
So if a
Yeah.
baby's not taking a bottle under 6 to 8 weeks, that there's
Mhm.
something going on. If the baby's over 8, 9, 10, 12 weeks where their light bulb's on and they're like, you're mom, you're not mom, that's a
Yeah.
different approach. So the
Mhm.
other thing for families to be aware of is how old is your baby? Because if they're
Yeah.
refusing as a newborn, that there's a problem going on. Down to flow, right? So it's the same
Mhm.
conversation of if you go to a drinking fountain and it flows really fast and you can't keep up, you're either going to pull off and be like,
Mm. Yeah.
right? Or you're going to cough and choke. So a lot of that is about flow. So babies, when they're born, they need to practice. They're practicing sucking and swallowing, but they haven't learned how to breathe yet. So biologically, babies start on colostrum, which is a small
Mhm.
amount and thick to help them coordinate. Suck, suck, suck. Little bit comes in my mouth. Swallow. Suck, suck, suck.
Mm.
Little comes in my mouth. Swallow. So they're supposed to be practicing suck, swallow, breathe with really small amounts of thick milk for like 2 to 3, 4 days. And then as they figure out how to suck and swallow and breathe without coughing and choking and having it go down the wrong pipe and getting a hole in their lip, the milk then thins out and increases in volume. So biology has pre-programmed our babies and our bodies to do this as an ebb and a flow, to start in a small, thick amount and gradually increase and thin out to help the baby practice. So when we're already like doing interventions at birth and they don't have the opportunity to learn that, the system can be like, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm swallowing
Yeah.
and I'm kind of go, 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 go.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So we're trying to use our bottles to be able to help them practice suck, swallow, breathe as if they were at the breast. So a lot of times you'll hear about paced bottle feeding. Paced
Mhm.
bottle feeding was a term developed for preemie babies in the neonatal unit for nursing staff to not overwhelm a baby before that coordination should develop, which is around 38 weeks. Okay. So if you have
Ah.
a baby born after 38 weeks, they should be born with that coordination in their brain pretty well intact. But under
Mhm.
38 weeks, the brain hasn't developed enough. So we pace them until they hit around 38 weeks so that they learn to coordinate that. It was all based on immature neurology in our preemie babies. What we should be doing when we have full term babies is called responsive feeding. And
Mm.
responsive feeding is watching the baby and saying they need a break. They are going too fast. I'm going to slow this down and give them a break. So
Yeah.
paced feeding technically was for preemie babies. Responsive feeding is what we should all be doing. And if you're having to constantly respond to the baby, if they're over 38 weeks, especially if they're full term, if you're constantly having to slow it down and pull it out, the bottle nipple's too fast.
Mm.
Because full term
Yeah.
babies should have that suck, swallow, breathe coordination starting in the first week after birth. So if they're not able to do what they're biologically pre-programmed to do, our device is too fast.
Oh, wow. I did not know that at all. That is really interesting. Um, yeah, you're really blowing my brain here, Julie. I'm gonna be honest with you.
because the breast would not should do that, right? The breast
Yeah.
has a letdown. So the baby triggers letdown. The milk flows, but then it slows and flow.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
the letdown is really only 30 to 90 seconds. We know that in the research. So it flows
Mm.
fast for just a little bit to help the baby suck and swallow and move milk. But then as that letdown slows, the baby is then in charge of suck, swallow, breathe. So
Mhm.
yes, during letdown, milk will spray and you can spray a baby in the face. But once that letdown has the actual pulsing of the milk ducts has slowed, that baby is now in charge of the suck, swallow, breathe. But on a bottle, it's instant and constant. So
Yeah.
they're constantly getting flow. So if the flow is too fast from the constantly flowing bottle and we're having to pace them so they don't chug too fast, the flow's
Mhm.
too fast.
You're using the slowest flow and they're still struggling with that. Do you recommend getting a different bottle? I mean, like, how would you slow it down even more if you're using the slowest flow for that specific bottle?
Yeah, usually there is no standard of marketing for bottle nipples. So a level 1 Dr. Brown's is not the same as a slow flow even flow, which is not the same as a super slow flow pigeon or a slow flow Lancino or a slow whatever. So there is a flow rate chart. Britt Patos has done the research on that. She's a phenomenal researcher that basically took the major brands and all the nipple flows and tested it scientifically and made a chart to show you how fast they flow. So if you have a baby that's struggling on a nipple flow, you can then say, where does that nipple flow fall in the chart? And you can go slower.
Kind of thing.
Yeah, so if you have something like a cleft palate, there are specialty feeders. Basically, when you have a cleft palate, there's a hole in the roof of the mouth, right? You have to have that palate intact to generate pressure in the mouth to suck and move milk. So when that's gone, it's like having a hole in the hose. You're not going to have any pressure to move milk. So the cleft palate feeders basically work on the adult compresses to move the milk, and then the baby just sucks and swallows. Those really are for very special populations and really should not be given to other populations except under the direction of a speech or occupational therapist or a very specialized IBCLC lactation consultant where we're compensating for something. So yes, they exist, but they shouldn't be in the hands of the general public without working, because there's a reason why a baby can't do that. And we want to figure out, why aren't they generating suction? Did we miss a submucous cleft? Is there actually a hole there that is being covered by the mouth tissue? Is there some other anatomical difference? Is there a genetic sequence or syndrome here that we're missing? Because that family needs support. So yes, there's all kinds of specialty feeders. Usually the adult would be involved in helping compress, but we don't want to be using those unless we really need to use those.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. I like, though, that there are options for those babies, and it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to get like a feeding tube or something like that. Very glad for science in that way that they've created.
It's not one size fits all. What works for your baby will be unique to your baby. And while there's optimal, sometimes we have to go functional. So optimally, we want a taper nipple that flows slow. But if your baby can't handle that, we want to know why, and we want to support you. So if you're using a different shaped nipple and that's the only one your baby will take, find support so that we can help figure out why. Okay. It's a lot about flexibility. The other big thing that people are looking at right now is the container that the milk goes in, right? Plastic versus glass, and sustainability. So a lot of families are preferring glass because of a number of reasons, right? Safety, limiting microplastics leaching into milk. We do know that milk fat does collect on plastic containers, so glass helps baby get more of the fat. So it's just looking at what the material is made out of to fit family lifestyle. And the big one, honestly, that's not talked about is affordability.
I was just saying the same thing, actually.
What do you have access to, and what can you afford? There's some very good cheap baby bottles. Even Flow Classic nipples look similar to a Dr. Brown's, but you can get a 3-pack for like $2 at Target, CVS, Walgreens, your local supermarket, right? There are some cheap baby bottles that have an optimal nipple to them that can work just as well as a really expensive marketed $40 baby bottle. And what do you have available in your community? So this is about fair access to families who may not have the ability to afford something that honestly is probably just marketed and not necessarily a better option.
Yeah. If you have a baby who is experiencing bottle refusal, and say they're like 4 or 5 months and you can't afford all of these different bottles, is that when you would suggest like talking with a lactation consultant, getting maybe like a straw cup or something?
Yeah, so honestly, open cups are my favorite
Yeah.
because we use those in the neonatal unit with 34-week-old premature babies. A cup could be a medicine cup. It could be a shot
Yeah.
glass. My husband was irritated at me that I used his glass 2-ounce shot glass with my baby. He's like, "Why are you using a shot glass with your milk for our baby? This looks weird. I don't feel right." But a shot glass has the small mouth diameter,
Yeah.
which is the same size as a baby. So if you're struggling with bottle feeding and you need to feed that baby, pull what you have out of your own cupboard. Medicine
Mhm.
cups are great options. I've even had patients that take the cap right off whatever bottle system they have, and
Mm.
all of a sudden now
Yeah.
we have a cup. Spoons are shallow cups. If you have
Mhm.
a spoon in your drawer, you have a cup to be able to feed the baby while you're
Yeah.
working on it. And yes, finding appropriate support while you're working on that is absolutely essential.
How do you find like a therapist who specializes in this? Because you're an SLP, but you even said that you specialize in feeding. Like, is that something you
Yeah.
can just Google?
Woo! It's a conversation, right? Like,
Yeah.
we are not taught this. Occupational speech and physical therapists are not taught this in grad school. This is additional information that we get from continuing education. Now, this is all I've
Yeah.
ever wanted to do in my career. So, for the last 20 years, this is what I've been specializing in. So it's basically who's available in your area, right? Like, I live in Los Angeles. I can give you a list of 50 different therapists and IBCLCs who are trained in this, but I'm population dense. You might
Yeah.
not be able to find somebody in Podunk, Idaho, right?
Yeah.
So yes, you can do a Google search and see who's in your area and then interview them. What kind of feeding experience do you have? Do you typically work with babies? What ages do you normally work with? Do you work with a lot of pre-crawling babies under 6 months? What trainings have you done? What coursework have you done? There are a number of us that do virtual appointments anywhere in the nation, right? Like, I have an OT in Nashville that I refer to for all of my virtual babies that have body issues that
Hmm.
might not have somebody in their area. She's phenomenal at doing virtual occupational therapy. And this is also her gifted passion area. So some of it is researching to see, is there somebody in your area? Google search, Yelp search, mommy groups, Facebook groups,
Yeah.
friends might be able to make that referral. And then, yes, there are directories of lactation consultants that have additional training where you can find somebody local.
Oh, that's amazing. Okay.
You will never know it all. I thought when I was a new clinician that I had figured it all out, that I
Yeah.
knew everything I needed to know in order to treat moms and babies. And the
Mhm.
longer I'm in the field, the more I realize that I don't know anything, right?
Yeah.
It is staying a lifelong learner and continuing to do more research and more courses and meeting more people and talking to more people and learning other perspectives to know that even if you've breastfed 20 babies, you've only breastfed 20 babies. And
Yeah.
there are billions of people in the world, and each of those journeys is unique and different. And so it's maintaining a humbleness to know that healthcare is a practice, and so is breastfeeding. That people practice breastfeeding, and it looks different for absolutely everybody. And it's just maintaining a posture of humble, lifelong learning.
Yeah. Gosh, you're gonna make me cry.
After birth.
Mhm.
So, oh, look at that. I got balloons. Okay. I don't know.